You're listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. Each week, your host, Polly Requa, interviews veterinarians and individuals in the pet industry from across the nation answering pet questions. Bark and Wag podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes can be found at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. That's BARKNWAG.com. Please remember to subscribe to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. Bark and Wag is dedicated to protecting our dogs through advocacy, education, and supporting like-minded dog lovers by selling custom pet products. Bark and Wag is excited to announce our new partnership with a Colorado hemp farm to produce a line of CBD products for your pets. Bark and Wag has CBD pet tincture available in 300, 750, 1200, and 2400 milligrams. Bark and Wag CBD is pet safe, no THC, it's made in the USA, and is CO2 extracted. Please check out Bark and Wag's website, barkandwag.com. That is BARK, to see our line of CBD and awesome merchandise. We love pooch ideas for podcasts and merchandise, so anytime send an email to Polly at barkandwag.com with your suggestions.
Welcome to Bark and Wag 15-Minute Vet Talk. I'm your host, Polly Requa. Today we're talking to Dr. Laura Brown, owner of Green Tree Animal Hospital in Libertyville, Illinois. Welcome, Dr. Brown.
Hey, Polly. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to find out, what are the signs that your dog has an eye infection?
So commonly they'll have some sort of colored discharge. So greenish yellow, gooey discharge. They might be really blinky, like holding their eyes shut and squinty about that. They might be rubbing it a ton or pawing at it a ton. And then the other thing too is if you can like open their eye and look at the white part of their eye, it might be really red.
What about when it's teary? Is that?
So teary isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Okay.
Extra tears happen probably allergy time of the year. People let their dogs stick their head out of the car when they ride in the car. That kind of dries their eyes out. So it makes them, extra wet, teary looking, like just like you, when you get, think about what happens to people when you get like a eyelash in your eye, you just blink, 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 blink. Your eye waters more to try and fix it. And so that can happen. People that take their dogs to doggy daycare, a lot of times they'll get not necessarily an infectious conjunctivitis, but an irritated, inflamed conjunctivitis, and the inside lining of the lids are red, and there's some discharge and sometimes some swelling, and it's just irritation from all the hair and dust and stuff that hangs out at daycare.
Okay.
Or in the backyard as far as that goes. People get pink eye, right? The pink eye's definition is conjunctivitis. But conjunctivitis just means inflammation of the conjunctiva. And the conjunctiva is the tissue that lines everybody's eyelids. And that's around your eyeballs, kind of. So when your eyelid tissue gets inflamed, that is conjunctivitis, and therefore causes redness, swelling, discharge. In people, pink eye technically is contagious. In dogs, it doesn't necessarily have to be contagious. It can be an irritant and it can be inflammatory, but it can also be a bacterial thing, potentially started by a viral thing. It's really hard to tell the difference though. So basically we treat all conjunctivitis as similarly as we check to make sure there's not a scratch on the surface of the cornea. Because if there's a scratch on the cornea, they'll be blinky and squinty and painful and dischargy and swollen too, because it's so irritating. And if you have a scratch on the cornea, you can't use an eye drop with steroids in it because it'll slow down healing.
Okay.
So we stain the eyes and make sure there's not a scratch. And if there's a scratch, they get just plain antibiotic drops. If there's not a scratch, they get antibiotic drops plus steroids. And a lot of flushing out the eye to get all the goo out and rinse anything out that got in there, that sort of thing.
And are there eye drops that you can just give your dog when you see that they're almost allergy driven?
Probably the safest thing to do is get an over-the-counter tear replacement drop.
Okay.
Like my favorite is like Genteel, because you got to be careful about that whole steroid versus not steroid thing. And so, so you could really damage the eye if you put steroids in when you shouldn't. But it's really important for the eye to be able to be healthy is to have plenty of tears. And so, and it also, when you put tear replacement tears in your dog's eyeball, it flushes things out. So sometimes they just need a rinse. They need it rinsed out, and a few days of some tears to help things heal, and they do okay on their own, especially if you're waiting to get into the veterinarian. But a sign of being super duper painful, like squinting, keeping their eyelids shut, really rubbing it, is a sign there might be a scratch.
Okay.
So then it's contraindicated to use steroids in those eyes.
If that's the case, do you have to go to a specialist, or does a veterinarian handle that?
Your regular GP veterinarian can do, run-of-the-mill conjunctivitis. And if there's something else going on that is a specialty that we can refer to, dogs get glaucoma. Usually I send them to the ophthalmologist if that's the case. I can start treatment, but the ophthalmologist just has some really cool toys and instruments that they use that we don't, that can see the retina in the back of their eye and all kinds of fun stuff that we don't do on a regular basis. But your basic run-of-the-mill conjunctivitis is a GP thing.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for all of the eye tips, and we look forward to having you back.
You're welcome. Sounds good.
Thank you for listening to Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, www.barkandwag.com, to your friends and other pet owners. Have a pressing question for a veterinarian? Ask your question at barkandwag.com under the podcast tab. This has been a KFR production. Join us next time for another edition of Bark and Wag's 15-Minute Vet Talk.